The audience chamber of the Thessari Imperial Palace is a masterpiece of architectural intimidation disguised as beauty. Vaulted ceilings that disappear into shadow 50 meters overhead. Columns of living crystal that shift color in response to the emotional states of everyone present. A subtle, constant reminder that nothing felt in this room remains private. Floor tiles polished to a mirror finish that reflects the ceremonial lighting overhead, creating the impression that attendees are standing on light itself rather than solid ground. And at the far end of the chamber, elevated on a dais that communicates authority through height alone, the throne of the Thessari Imperial House, carved from a single piece of material that predates the current empire by millennia. Ambassador Marcus Thane has stood in this chamber 17 times in 3 years of service as humanity's senior diplomatic representative to the Thessari Empire. He knows exactly where to stand, knows exactly how to bow, deep enough to communicate respect without so deep that it suggests submission, knows the precise cadence of the verbal acknowledgments that formal audiences require, knows the choreography well enough that he could perform it in his sleep. What he's never been able to fully prepare for is the weight of the room itself. The accumulated gravity of 8,000 years of imperial authority concentrated into a single space, pressing down on everyone present with the quiet, relentless force of something ancient and patient and entirely accustomed to being obeyed. Today's audience is formal, the kind that requires full court attendance. Approximately 200 Thessari nobles, advisors, military commanders, and diplomatic officials line the chamber's perimeter, positioned according to rank and house affiliation in arrangements so precise that a single misplaced noble would create a political incident lasting weeks. Their skin colors are carefully managed, neutral silvers and diplomatic golds that communicate presence without revealing the political calculations running beneath the surface. Marcus stands at the designated position for foreign ambassadors, center of the chamber, equidistant from the throne and the main entrance, positioned where every eye in the room can observe him without turning. It's not a comfortable position. It's not meant to be. It's meant to communicate that the person standing there is the focus of the room's attention, and that nothing they say or do in this space will go unnoticed or unanalyzed. Queen Seraphia sits on the throne at the far end of the chamber, with the kind of absolute composure that only decades of practiced authority can produce. She's not young. Her skin shows the deep, layered colors that indicate age and experience in Thessari physiology, and her elongated ears bear the ceremonial adornments that mark imperial rank, with a precision that communicates not just authority, but the specific history of how that authority was earned and maintained. She's magnificent. There's no other word for it. Not in the way that physical beauty is magnificent, though she possesses that too. In the way that power maintained with perfect control over decades is magnificent, the way a mountain is magnificent or an ocean. Something that simply exists with such completeness that questioning its presence feels absurd. Marcus has studied Queen Seraphia extensively, read every available account of her reign, every diplomatic transcript, every analysis of her decision-making patterns. He understands her reputation. A ruler who has maintained the Thessari Empire's stability through a combination of genuine political genius and an absolute mastery of the formal court environment. A queen who has never, in 30 years on the throne, been visibly surprised by anything said or done in her presence. Today's audience has a stated purpose, a formal review of the Earth Thessari Alliance's progress, requiring the human ambassador to present an assessment of cooperation achievements and identify areas for continued development. It's routine enough on paper. Marcus has prepared his presentation thoroughly. The data is solid. The diplomatic framing is careful. Everything is designed to satisfy the formal requirements of the audience without revealing anything that could be exploited politically. But Marcus has also learned, in 3 years of navigating Thessari court politics, that formal audiences are never simply about their stated purpose. Their performances, carefully choreographed exchanges in which both sides demonstrate capability, evaluate each other's responses, and extract information through questions that are designed to reveal more than the answers themselves acknowledge. The Queen's questions, in particular, are legendary among human diplomatic staff. Elegantly constructed, precisely targeted, open enough to allow the respondent room to maneuver, to give answers that satisfy protocol without revealing genuine position or commitment. Designed not to trap exactly, but to evaluate, to see how the person being questioned navigates the space between what's asked and what's actually being tested. Every previous human ambassador has navigated these questions successfully, giving answers that were diplomatically sound, politically safe, and entirely devoid of anything that could be used to advantage or disadvantage either species in the ongoing negotiation of alliance terms. Marcus intends to do the same. He delivers his presentation with practiced fluency, the cooperation achievements highlighted, the areas for development identified, the diplomatic language precise enough to communicate substance without revealing anything beyond what the formal requirements demand. The court listens with the attentive composure of people who have attended hundreds of similar presentations and are evaluating not just the content, but the manner in which it's delivered. Queen Seraphia listens from her throne with an expression that reveals nothing, the perfect, practiced neutrality of someone who processes information without displaying her response to it, until she's decided exactly what response she wants others to see. When Marcus finishes, the chamber falls into the specific silence that precedes a formal question from the throne. Every person present knows what's coming. The silence itself is part of the choreography, a moment of collective attention that communicates the weight of what follows. Queen Seraphia speaks, and the question she asks changes everything. "Ambassador Thane," Queen Seraphia says, and her voice fills the chamber with the effortless authority of someone who has never needed to raise her voice to command attention. "You have presented the achievements of our alliance with clarity and precision. I find myself satisfied with the substance of your assessment." She pauses. The pause is deliberate, long enough to communicate that what follows is separate from what preceded it. Long enough for every person in the chamber to understand that the formal presentation is complete and something different is beginning. "I have one question," the Queen continues. "A single question, which I would like you to answer directly and without the benefit of prepared remarks." The chamber's silence deepens. Skin colors shift subtly throughout the assembled court, analytical blues and contemplative purples appearing on faces that recognize the significance of what's happening. A direct question from the throne, posed after formal presentation, outside the prepared framework. This is the moment the audience was actually built around. Everything before it was prologue. Marcus stands perfectly still. His expression doesn't change. His posture doesn't shift. He's been expecting this, not the specific question, but the moment itself. The point in the audience where the choreography gives way to something less predictable. "I am prepared to answer, Your Majesty," he says, delivering the formal acknowledgement with the practiced precision that 3 years of diplomatic service require. Queen Seraphia regards him for a long moment. Her skin shows the deep, layered gold of imperial authority maintained with absolute confidence. The color of someone who has posed questions like this dozens of times and has never once been genuinely surprised by the answers she received. "The alliance between our species," she begins, and her voice carries the careful, measured cadence of someone constructing a question with precision, "has produced cooperation that benefits both Earth and the Thessari Empire. Your species has gained access to technology, territory, and military capability that would have taken centuries to develop independently. The Thessari Empire has gained a partner capable of contributing to shared objectives in ways that serve imperial interests." She pauses again. The construction is deliberate, laying a foundation before placing the question on top of it, creating a framework that the respondent is expected to work within rather than step outside of. "Given this mutual benefit," Queen Seraphia continues, "and given that the alliance remains in its early stages with significant room for development in both directions, tell me, Ambassador Thane, if the Thessari Empire were to propose terms that significantly expanded human access to our technology and territory, but required human military forces to accept Thessari command authority in joint operations, would your government accept?" The question lands in the chamber with the quiet precision of something carefully aimed. Marcus hears it, processes it, understands not just the surface content but the layers beneath it, the political implications, the diplomatic implications, the specific way the question is constructed to allow for maneuvering. The question is elegant, genuinely elegant. It's framed as a hypothetical, if the Empire were to propose, which gives Marcus room to answer conditionally. It presents a trade that sounds favorable on the surface, expanded access in exchange for military command authority, which allows him to respond positively without actually committing to anything. And it's broad enough that any answer he gives can be interpreted multiple ways, allowing both sides to claim the exchange served their purposes regardless of what actually happens afterward. Every previous human ambassador, faced with a question constructed this carefully, has navigated it through the available space, has given an answer that expressed willingness to discuss the proposal while preserving flexibility, has demonstrated diplomatic sophistication by showing they understood the question's complexity without revealing their actual position on the substance. Marcus understands all of this, sees the space, sees the maneuvering room, sees exactly how a careful, diplomatically sound answer could be constructed that would satisfy the formal requirements of the audience without revealing anything that could be used to advantage or disadvantage either species. He also sees something else. He sees that the question, beneath all its diplomatic elegance, is asking something specific, something that the constructed framework is designed to obscure rather than illuminate. And he sees that giving the kind of answer the framework invites would be, not dishonest, exactly, but incomplete in a way that matters. Incomplete in a way that would allow an assumption to persist that shouldn't persist. An assumption that the Queen is clearly relying on to maintain her understanding of the alliance's dynamics. The assumption that human willingness to cooperate is flexible, that it can be shaped and redirected through sufficiently attractive terms, that human diplomatic responses reflect calculated positioning rather than genuine position. Marcus looks at Queen Seraphia across the length of the audience chamber, holds her gaze with the calm, unhurried steadiness that 3 years of diplomatic service have produced, not nervousness disguised as composure, but actual composure built on the specific kind of clarity that comes from knowing exactly what you're going to say and why. He doesn't give the answer the question invites. He gives the only answer that the question actually deserves. No, he says, the word is simple. Direct, delivered without qualification, without conditional framing, without any of the diplomatic hedging that the question's construction was designed to accommodate. A single syllable that removes every piece of maneuvering room the question provided and replaces it with a clear, unambiguous position. No, Marcus repeats, and his voice carries the silence that follows Marcus's answer is different from the silence that preceded the question. The silence before the question was ceremonial, the practiced, collective quiet that formal audiences produce when the throne is about to speak. It was expected, choreographed, part of the performance. The silence after the answer is none of those things. It's the silence of a room that has just witnessed something it didn't anticipate. Not dramatic, not shocking in the way that a scandal or a confrontation might be shocking. Simply unexpected. A departure from the pattern that every person present has seen repeated dozens of times, executed so cleanly and completely that the departure itself becomes the most significant thing that has happened in the chamber all day. Lord Kethos, positioned among the senior advisors along the chamber's eastern wall, sees it first. He's been Queen Seraphia's chief advisor for 11 years, long enough to have developed the specific kind of attention that comes from spending decades watching a ruler interact with the world. He reads the Queen the way a scholar reads ancient text, not just the words on the surface, but the layers beneath them, the meanings that experience and context reveal to someone who knows where to look. He sees the flicker. It's small, barely perceptible to anyone who isn't specifically watching for it. A shift in the Queen's skin color, not from gold to something else, but within gold itself. A deepening, a momentary loss of the perfect, practiced uniformity that has characterized her composure throughout the entire audience. As though something beneath the surface has stirred, and the surface, for just an instant, failed to maintain its perfect stillness over it. It lasts less than a second. By the time anyone else in the chamber might notice it, the Queen's composure has reasserted itself, the gold settling back into its practiced, unbroken smoothness as though the flicker never happened. But Kethos saw it. and he knows what it means. In 30 years of advising Thessari rulers, first the previous emperor, then Queen Seraphia, Kethos has seen composure slip precisely 4 times. Each time, the cause was the same: something genuinely unexpected. Not a challenge to authority, not a provocative statement designed to provoke reaction. Something that removed the framework the ruler was relying on to maintain control of an exchange. Something that made the practiced response, the one that had been prepared, the one that fit the expected pattern, suddenly irrelevant. Marcus Thane's answer did exactly that. The question had been constructed to allow flexibility, to give the human ambassador room to maneuver within a framework that the queen controlled. The framework assumed that the ambassador would work within it, would give an answer that could be interpreted, analyzed, and responded to on terms the queen set. Marcus removed the framework entirely, gave an answer so direct, so completely without diplomatic qualification, that there was nothing to interpret. Nothing to analyze for hidden meaning or political positioning. Nothing to respond to on terms that preserved the queen's control of the exchange. He simply told the truth. And the truth, in this context, was more unsettling than any challenge to authority could have been. Lady Maren, positioned at the court's designated observation point near the chamber's northern wall, sees it too, though she interprets what she sees slightly differently than Kethos does. Maren is a court observer, one of several individuals whose role is to attend formal audiences and produce detailed analyses of the exchanges for the Imperial Advisory Council. She's been doing this work for 22 years, and she has attended more formal audiences than she can accurately count. She has seen hundreds of questions posed from the throne, has seen hundreds of answers given in response, has seen the full range of diplomatic maneuvering that formal audiences produce. She has never seen an answer like Marcus Thane's, not because it was confrontational, not because it challenged the queen's authority or demonstrated disrespect or violated any of the formal protocols that govern court behavior. It did none of those things. If anything, Marcus's answer was more respectful than most. It acknowledged the queen's question directly, addressed it completely, and offered an explanation for why the answer took the form it did. What made it unprecedented was the simplicity, the absolute absence of diplomatic hedging, conditional framing, or strategic ambiguity. A direct question answered directly. A position stated clearly enough that no amount of subsequent interpretation could alter what had been communicated. In Maren's 22 years of observing formal audiences, she has never seen a foreign ambassador give an answer that left zero room for subsequent reinterpretation. The entire purpose of diplomatic language, the entire reason formal audiences are structured the way they are, is to preserve room for interpretation. To allow both sides to claim the exchange served their purposes, to maintain the fiction that positions are flexible and negotiations are ongoing. Marcus Thane, in a single word followed by 2 sentences of explanation, dismantled that fiction entirely. And the queen's composure, maintained with perfect control through 30 years of ruling, through thousands of formal audiences, through every kind of challenge and provocation and unexpected development that court life produces, flickered. The audience continues. Queen Seraphia responds to Marcus's answer with the practiced grace that decades of ruling have produced, acknowledging the position stated, thanking the ambassador for his directness, transitioning the formal exchange toward its ceremonial conclusion with the same smooth, controlled authority she's demonstrated throughout. But something has changed in the room. Something subtle enough that most of the assembled court will process it only afterward. When they're reviewing the audience in private conversation, analyzing what happened, trying to articulate why the exchange felt different from every other formal audience they've attended. The difference is this. For the first time in living memory, a question posed from the throne received an answer that the throne wasn't prepared for. Not because the answer was hostile or provocative or strategically calculated to unsettle. Because it was honest. Simply, directly, completely honest, in a way that the ceremonial framework of the formal audience was never designed to accommodate. And honesty, in a space built entirely around the careful management of what is revealed and what is concealed, carries a weight that no amount of diplomatic sophistication can match. The audience concludes. Marcus bows, the precise, practiced bow that 3 years of diplomatic service require. The court begins its ceremonial dispersal. Nobles drift toward exits, skin colors shifting from diplomatic neutrality toward the more complex colors of private processing and political analysis. Lord Kethos catches Lady Maren's eye across the chamber as the dispersal proceeds. His expression communicates a question without words. Maren nods once. She saw it too. The composure slipped, for just an instant, for just long enough to matter. And the human ambassador, standing in the center of the chamber with the calm, unhurried steadiness of someone who knew exactly what his answer would do and chose it anyway, begins the walk back toward the chamber's entrance with the same composed bearing he brought to the room when he entered it. He doesn't look back at the throne. He doesn't need to. The answer has been given. The truth has been spoken. And in a chamber designed to maintain the careful balance between what is said and what is meant, something has shifted permanently. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. The private meeting request arrives 3 hours after the formal audience concludes, delivered through channels that bypass the normal diplomatic scheduling process entirely, communicated directly from the imperial household to the human embassy with a specificity that leaves no room for misinterpretation. The Queen wants to speak with Marcus Thane. Privately. Without court, without advisors, without the ceremonial framework that normally accompanies every interaction between the imperial throne and foreign representatives. In 3 years of serving as humanity's senior diplomatic representative to the Thessari Empire, Marcus has never received a request like this. No previous human ambassador has, either, the imperial household's records, which Marcus has access to through standard diplomatic channels, contain no precedent for a private audience between the Thessari Queen and a foreign ambassador outside of formal court settings. He accepts without hesitation. Spends the intervening hours reviewing everything he knows about Queen Seraphia, not because he expects the private meeting to require preparation in the way formal audiences do, but because understanding the person he's about to speak with matters more than preparing specific responses. The meeting takes place in a small chamber adjacent to the imperial quarters, not the grand audience hall where this morning's formal exchange occurred, but something intimate by comparison. A room with comfortable seating, soft lighting, and none of the architectural intimidation that characterizes the spaces where the Queen conducts public business. It feels almost deliberately chosen to communicate that this conversation exists outside the normal framework, that the rules governing formal court exchanges don't apply here. Queen Seraphia is already seated when Marcus enters. Without throne, without ceremonial adornment beyond what she wears naturally, without the layered formality that the audience chamber demands, she looks different. Still impressive. Still carrying the weight of decades of authority in the way she holds herself, the way her skin moves through colors with the fluid control of long practice. But quieter. More present in a way that the formal audience didn't allow. Her skin shows colors that Marcus hasn't seen her wear before, complex layers that suggest she's feeling something she hasn't fully decided how to express. Not vulnerability, exactly. Something more like genuine curiosity mixed with the particular discomfort of encountering something that doesn't fit the patterns she's spent decades learning to navigate. "Ambassador Thane," she says. "Sit, please, no ceremony. No protocol. I want to speak with you as one person speaks with another, directly, without the performance that formal audiences require." Marcus sits. The invitation to drop formality is unusual enough that he takes a moment to register it before responding. "Understood, Your Majesty. I want to ask you something," Seraphia says, "and I want you to answer the way you answered this morning. Directly, without diplomatic framing. Without the kind of careful construction that formal audiences normally produce." "I'll do my best," Marcus says. Seraphia is quiet for a moment, her skin cycling through contemplative colors. Then she looks at him with an expression that carries the weight of someone who has spent decades ruling and has just encountered something that her decades of experience didn't prepare her for. "Why?" she asks. Simply that. A single word, carrying the full weight of everything that happened in the audience chamber this morning. Marcus considers the question, not because the answer is complicated, because he wants to give it accurately. to say what he actually means rather than what sounds impressive or strategically valuable or diplomatically sophisticated. Because you asked a real question, he says. Beneath the diplomatic construction, beneath the hypothetical framing, beneath all the layers of careful language, you asked something real. Something that had a real answer. And giving you a diplomatic response to a real question would have been dishonest. Not technically dishonest. The kind of answer your question was designed to accommodate would have been technically accurate. But it would have preserved an ambiguity that the question didn't actually deserve. He pauses, choosing his next words with the same care he brought to his answer in the audience chamber. Your question assumed that human willingness to cooperate is flexible, that it can be shaped through sufficiently attractive terms. That assumption is wrong. And I could have given an answer that left the assumption intact, that preserved the diplomatic fiction that everything is negotiable, that allowed both sides to continue operating on the basis of a misunderstanding. But you chose not to, Seraphia observes. I chose not to, Marcus confirms, because the misunderstanding matters. Because if the alliance between our species is built on assumptions about human flexibility that aren't accurate, then the alliance is built on something that will eventually fail, when the assumptions are tested against reality and reality doesn't match. He looks at her directly. Honesty isn't a strategy, Your Majesty. It's not something I chose because it would be more effective than diplomacy or more impressive than a carefully constructed response. I chose it because it was the only answer that respected both your question and the truth. Every other answer would have been a performance, and you deserved better than a performance. Seraphia is quiet for a long time after he finishes speaking. Her skin cycles through colors that Marcus has learned, over 3 years of studying Thessari emotional expression, indicate deep processing. The kind of internal activity that occurs when someone is genuinely reconsidering something they thought they understood. In 30 years on the throne, she says finally, I have posed questions in formal audience to hundreds of foreign representatives. Each question has been answered with the kind of diplomatic sophistication that formal audiences require, careful, flexible, designed to preserve room for subsequent negotiation. I have never received an answer that removed that room entirely. She pauses. I have never received an answer that made me uncomfortable in the way your answer made me uncomfortable this morning. I'm sorry if it was uncomfortable, Marcus says, and means it, not as diplomatic hedging, but as genuine acknowledgement that what he did in the audience chamber disrupted something the Queen had spent decades maintaining. Don't be sorry, Seraphia replies, and something in her voice shifts, from the practiced authority of a ruler to something more personal, more honest. Be aware of what you did. What you actually did, beneath the surface of simply answering a question directly. She leans forward slightly, a small physical movement that communicates engagement rather than authority. You removed the framework I was relying on, not just for that specific exchange, for my understanding of how human diplomatic representatives interact with this court. I have spent 30 years